Hello, I'm Tom Dozier, and this video is the Neural Repatterning Technique and the Trigger Tamer app. When we think about misophonia, we generally think of it as having a trigger, a crunch, and that causes this involuntary extreme emotion or fight or flight response. What I have observed from working with people for the last 2 years is that misophonia really is a two-step process. You hear the trigger, there is a physical reaction, a physical reflex, and the physical reflex jerks the extreme emotion or the fight or flight response out of you. So what I've seen is that if we can stop the physical reflex, then there's no emotional response. Now, this video, then the neural repatterning technique, is about stopping the emotional response to misophonia, essentially stopping your misophonia, by eliminating that physical reflex. Now, first I want you to hear from Virginia some of her comments about eliminating a trigger to a family member singing around the house. Let's hear Virginia.
I think probably it was about 3 weeks into it I started realizing that this is really working, because I have to say that I did not think anything would work. Well, I think a lot of people feel that way that have this. And of course I felt that when I was young that I was the only person in the world that had ever experienced this. But after about 3 weeks, I started seeing the improvement, and it was gradual, but it was definite, and I could tell that the trigger was going away, it was getting lighter. And then when I started experiencing the trigger in real life, and realized I wasn't having those emotions or that anger, it was like a miracle.
Okay. The other thing I want to kind of get out in the open up front here is that the neural repatterning technique is not an aversive treatment. It is happy time. So I want you to hear this clip where Virginia talks about the neural repatterning technique treatment sessions using the Trigger Tamer app. Once again, Virginia.
After I got through the apprehension of the whole thing, because again, I'm 75, coming on 75. So for all of these years, I've just tried to avoid these sounds. And to finally look forward to this treatment and hearing those sounds was amazing to me. It was, it's life-changing.
Okay. I want to start by telling you a little about reflexes, and specifically leading into the misophonia reflex. So reflexes are controlled by our autonomic nervous system. It's at the top of our spine, the base of the brain, where it swells out, and I call it your lizard brain. It controls the involuntary actions of the body. So there's a stimulus and then this reflex response, and I call it your lizard brain. Think about a lizard. He crawls up on a rock. If he's the right type, he turns brown. Crawls up on a leaf, he turns green. Does the lizard think about what color he's supposed to be? No. It's just an involuntary reflex. Now, some of your reflexes would be things like sweating. Can you choose to sweat on command or not sweat? No. You go out in the bright light, your pupil constricts. That's a reflex. All of your food processing is reflex. Your heart rate is a reflex. The startle reflex, pop a balloon behind someone and they'll jerk. And that's a reflex driven by your lizard brain. Now, you have the ones that you were born with, innate or inborn reflexes, and we have a bunch of them. But we also acquire reflexes all throughout our life. And these acquired reflexes, this process is called classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning. And the story of Pavlov and his dogs, he was doing research on digestion and salivation, and he discovered that the dogs were producing saliva before they ever got the meat. And so he was the first to show that he could ring a bell, give them the meat, they produce saliva. Bell, meat, saliva, bell, no meat, they produce the saliva. So what happens is that when you get this pairing of a stimulus and this response, then they lock together so that the lizard brain, because he's observed this happening over and over and over, decides to automatically fire off the reflex because of the stimulus. Now, this is a a time-sensitive situation here. So to pick up this conditioned reflex response or acquired reflex in humans, the critical timing is about a half second. So if I do a bing and then I poke you, bing, poke you, a half second later, bing, you're going to start flinching when you hear that bing. But anywhere maybe from 0 to 5 seconds, it's still a reasonable pairing window. So usually with these conditioned reflexes, when you stop producing the bell meat saliva, you stop producing the meat, the saliva goes away after a while, but misophonia reflexes don't die out. And I asked myself, why not? And what I think is happening is that you're getting the trigger, the crunch, and you're getting the reflex, but then you're getting an emotional boost. And so your lizard brain is comparing the crunch to this really tight muscle, even though the lizard brain only did it halfway. And it's going, oh, well, next time I should do it harder. And so with misophonia, because of this emotional boost, the reflex doesn't die out. So to eliminate the misophonia reflex, what we have to do is we have to be able to hear the trigger and then have a smaller than typical reaction, or have it go clunk and then let it drop off almost immediately. Now, to get that, you can either have, positive emotions, relaxed or happy, instead of the ooh, upset misophonia emotions, or maybe muscle relaxation can be used, or to block the reflex, depends on the reflex. But if the lizard brain is hearing the crunch and he's seeing less of a response at a half a second later, then over time he's going to stop responding. Now the problem, and this is called counter conditioning, but the problem is in that 0 to 5 second pairing window after the trigger, these counter conditioning actions are just not powerful enough to overcome the emotion that comes with misophonia. So it's very unusual that a person can just counter condition away one of these reflexes, although there are stories and cases where it's been done. So what I did with the neural repatterning technique is that I started by reducing the trigger, so that instead of getting this full-size trigger, I get a little bitty trigger. And it's a little bit like an allergy treatment for peanuts. If you're highly allergic to peanuts and you eat a peanut, you're going to die. But the allergy treatment is to take a serum that has a millionth or a billionth or whatever level of peanut that the doctors figured out works, and they give you a little bit of that peanut, and then your body adjusts to it and stops reacting. Well, that's what the neural repatterning technique is we give you just a little bit of the trigger sound and let your lizard brain stop responding. So it usually is best, and everyone I work with now, I work with a recorded trigger, although I have worked with live triggers. And when I was kind of setting this up, I used a scale of 0 to 5 as a rating factor for the trigger strength, the response to the trigger. So if you're in real world, somebody comes up, sits down beside you and starts crunching a taco, and that's one of your triggers, then that response is a 5. But if my voice isn't triggering you, then that's a 0. There's no physical hit or kick to it. So what I look for with this neural repatterning technique is to get like a response of a 1, maybe a 2, but generally down in a 1, where the person can stay positive and calm and happy. Pair it with something that's pleasant. I've had it work with calming, relaxing music. Let me look at this. Here's an example of a calming, relaxing music that was used. And the person would just close their eyes and relax, and occasionally they would hear that little bloop trigger stimulus and have a little reaction. Of course, then there was the person I worked with. This was the first person, and this was his happy music. Not my happy music. not my happy music at all, but he really got into it. I've also worked with an individual where we talked during the treatments, and we just talked about happy, successful things in their life, and that was a positive stimulus. I've seen cases where they've used massage. A couple of people used pictures. One lady used pictures of her nephews, and another used pictures of her dog that she just lifted her heart. But you need to have something that's a positive place to be, or a calm, once again, calm or happy, that can be paired against the disruptive response from the trigger, although it's still small. So a couple of cases here. The first person that I ever did this with, we did live. It was a 15-year-old boy. He triggered to family members, especially his mother, crunching, and so mom ate little bitty pieces of Fritos while we listened to that really kind of harsh music, and his reactions just melted away. And then he tried to go home and eat with his family, but he couldn't do that because he still triggered to the jaw movement. So they came back and we did a couple more treatments with the jaw movement, where he would look at his mother and then look away, look at his mother and then look away, to keep the trigger small while he was listening to his wonderful music. And pretty soon he stopped triggering to that. He was really marginally compliant with the homework. He really changed very, very quickly. And he went back to eating with his family again without disruption. So it wasn't that it eliminated all of his reaction, but it brought it down to the level that it was reasonable and manageable. Now, the best documented case I have was with the next person I worked with, was with a 48-year-old woman, and she triggered to the sounds of her husband eating bread, eating sorbet, scratching his beard, and a visual of putting his hand up to his face. Well, we used a Skype session. I had the triggers recorded where I could play, and she would give me the signal as to whether that was a 1 or a 2 or a half or 1 1/4. And we worked on the first one of her husband eating bread for 2 weeks, and her response went way down. And then we took the second one, him eating sorbet, and it went down, and then to scratching the beard, and it went down. Each of these about 2 weeks. What we found, though, is that with time, that eating bread sound continued to die out in the real world. And then we went for the trigger of putting the hand to the face. It took 9 weeks to really get that down to where she wasn't triggering at me and where she could really ignore it at home. Now, this chart shows her Misophonia Assessment Questionnaire sum score. And the total score, maximum is 63, shows how severe a person's misophonia is. And she started at a 41. After 2 treatments and the homework, she was down to 17. 2 more treatments and the homework, she was down to 7. But her husband had been out of town for a week, so that's artificially low. And then she was at a 9 and a 9. And when we came back at a 4-month follow-up, she was down to a 5. And at a 10-month follow-up, she was down to a 3. So although she still triggers and occasionally needs to move away, they're small triggers. She may notice it and then look away, but it doesn't have the emotional upheaval there. And you can see from her overall misophonia score, she's not worried about misophonia. So that's really a very, very positive benefit to her life. A couple other little cases, worked with an 8-year-old with the parents. We did the Neural Repatterning Technique. She was dancing around the room. The parents did lots of sessions with this little girl. And they got rid of one sound and another, but they kept still having some trouble at the table. And finally they added in some fan noise, and it's pretty much they eat together without a problem now. So we saw the improvement, but we didn't see that this treatment does not cure misophonia. I had a really interesting case earlier in the summer where there was a college student. She was home for the summer, and she had a couple of really strong triggers with her mom. And she did muscle relaxation training the first week while we were getting things ready for the trigger taming, and her reflex was a hand clench, which is a pretty easy muscle to relax. Here's what she wrote on the Google Play app review. My life has changed forever. I finally have control over my own suffering. Finding this app has been a complete miracle. Misophonia was ruining my life to the point where I couldn't stay in classes or couldn't concentrate because of the noises, and I decided to go to Tom Dozier for help. After just 2 treatment sessions using the app, I could stand being around my mother while we ate. Chewing and spoons on porcelain were some of my biggest triggers. Treatment for me worked very fast, and I'm excited to continue to eliminate other triggers. While I cannot completely eliminate reactions in real life, I barely react to the trigger, at least not to the rage I used to have. Now, I hope this works for her with her more public triggers, because the neural repatterning technique has only been proven to work with specific sounds for specific situations. So when she's dealing with crunching in a classroom, she's going to have to work at that setting, focused on that sound specifically. Another case, one of the first people who used the app, once I released the app, he called me up and we talked about it to see how to get him going. And then he sent me back this email. He says, I have some excellent news. I've been doing my work with the app every day for about 10 days, at least an hour each session. If I'm feeling good, I can do 3 hours or so while I'm at work. I was gradually increasing the volume, frequency, and the length of the trigger sound, which is sniffing. Today, I had a conversation with my roommate, and partway through, I realized he was sniffing and I was having no physical reflex. I then began focusing on the sound as if part of me knew something was supposed to happen, but I had no negative feelings each time I heard the sound. And then he wrote me back a few weeks later. He said, I've been working on crunching now, and I have definitely noticed a sensitivity decrease. I have even noticed an anxiety decrease when I know I might hear a trigger. I've realized I still really dislike the sound, but I can handle it much better. Just the decrease in anxiety has been great. So again, it doesn't cure misophonia, but it greatly pulls the reflex down. Now, what do we need to do to make the neural repatterning technique work for you? Well, we have to set it up so that your misophonia reflex response is like an eye blink. Bloop, bloop, if it's the hand. Suppose this is the reflex, it'll be like bloop. So there needs to be no residual. It needs to be gone instantly. It's better if it's a skeletal muscle. Now, you can't choose what the reflex is. It's already there. But if it's a skeletal muscle, then you can do muscle relaxation training so that you are better at relaxing that muscle before it triggers. You want to have the trigger rate, triggers coming often enough that you have the experience with the triggers, but you don't want it so much that it stresses you out. You don't want that stress to build. And then you want to increase the length and the volume of the trigger as your reflex response goes down. And I've seen between 100 and 300 exposures of a trigger can give a meaningful reduction with the Trigger Tamer. And once it goes pretty much down with the Trigger Tamer, then you're ready. Once it almost goes away with the Trigger Tamer, then you're ready for real life. Still expect a reflex there, but not nearly as high as it was before you did the neural repatterning technique. Generally, I recommend 30 minutes a day, 4 to 6 days a week, and it needs to be happy time. Smile, enjoy the music, relax, do something fun, and it's automated with the Trigger Tamer apps so that you can provide the treatment wherever you want to and you have control of it. So you're the boss, you're in charge. Now sometimes there's some problems where the neural repatterning treatment does not work. For example, if you can't be triggered by a recording, you can't use it. If you have no happy place or you can't relax, then it won't work for you. If the triggers linger, once you're triggered, if it doesn't just bleep and go away, then it won't work. And an example of that would be things like an intestine constriction or stomach constriction or sexual arousal. those tend to linger more and they don't really respond to the treatment because you can't get that little bloop. But I've seen it work with nausea. A person said their stomach flipped, and it worked with that. So the neural repatterning technique is suitable for specific triggers where you have a stimulus of a single person or a single thing that's very consistent, or for an emerging trigger, one that's just coming on, but an emerging trigger will almost always be single person, single place. It's not suitable for a general trigger, something like gum chewing by anyone, anywhere, or sniffing by anyone, anywhere. In fact, I had one of my best students in this treatment. She was a teacher, and she did the homework faithfully, and she did the muscle relaxation faithfully, and she would get to school, and she didn't trigger with the app, but she got to school, kid sniffs at school, and it still got her. And I think that was that setting difference, because reflexes are very context or situation sensitive. Well, a little bit about the Trigger Tamer app. There's two versions. The one that's the blue head version is called the Misophonia Trigger Tamer. It's available on iTunes and Google Play, and it uses an audio trigger. And we're just releasing the version 2, which has a trigger editor, so you can record it with your phone and edit out to get just the section of it that you want. That's the Misophonia Trigger Tamer. And then Android only has the Visual Trigger Tamer, and it uses a video trigger. And it also allows the video for the positive video pictures or audio for your positive stimulus. The Trigger Tamer app has really allowed the cost of this treatment to come way down, because originally doing the neural repatterning treatment individually took about an hour and a half of my time per week. And so that got very expensive, but with the app is $40. There was online tutorials. And if you work with me, it costs about $200 to get you set up and get you going, and then $25 to $50 every week or two just for helping coordinate and troubleshoot your treatment. So you can get a 12-week treatment program for $500 to $600, even working with me guiding you through this treatment. The neural repatterning technique complements other treatments, such as the misophonia management protocol, where you're using sound, filling your life with background sounds, or using the audiologist provided sound generators that go behind the ear. The Trigger Tamer, that gives you a management in the real world, and then the Trigger Tamer will allow you to bring those reflexes down to make it even better. Or if you're doing cognitive or dialectical behavioral therapy, which is very good for dealing with the emotional upheaval from the trigger, but it doesn't get rid of the actual trigger response. And so the Trigger Tamer can work down that trigger response. I'd love to have the opportunity to help you with your misophonia, so if you would like that personal help, contact me, and I'd love to work with you. So thank you for watching this video on the Neural Repatterning Technique and the Trigger Tamer app. I'm Tom Dozier saying thank you, and if you've benefited from this video, I'd appreciate a donation to the Misophonia Treatment Institute, where we will use those funds for education, misophonia awareness, research, and development of treatments. Thank you very much.